The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you.
Heritage, friends, and lessons. 3 words to describe Alan Ash's story. His aviation journey was inspired by his dad's passion for flying. This led Al to purchase his very own aircraft with a friend years later, soaring the skies of Florida and the surrounding states. Valuable lessons were learned along the way, which you won't want to miss. Welcome back to Skyward, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes of the aviation and aerospace industry. I'm pilot Mercedes, and today we're joined by Alan Ash, an FAA commercially licensed and instrument-rated pilot from Florida. All right, well, welcome to the Skyward podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's so wonderful. I've known you for years, and now I actually get to hear your pilot story.
Yeah,
so
I get to tell it to somebody.
Yeah,
somebody
exactly.
who really cares.
Oh, I very much really care, for sure.
Nice.
Well, to start, when did you first become interested in aviation?
Well, my very first logbook entry
Yeah.
was March of 1967.
Okay.
So I'm a December baby, so I wasn't quite 17 yet. I was 16 at the time. But that's my first logbook entry. But my dad and I used to fly since around the time that I was 14. And he was a pilot. He was an Army Air Corps pilot. And he joined and volunteered in 1941. And he became a pilot, just going through primary flight school, and flew Stearmans and AT-6, and then they discovered that he needed glasses.
Oh, man.
So he washed out of the program because of that. But he still loved it, and he was still able to take all those skills because he went far enough into the program to become a pilot.
Yeah.
And so when he got out, he was transferred to other divisions, and then when he got out, he wanted to still do it. So he was able to take what he had done in the military and have it transfer so that he was fairly easy to get his license, to get his private pilot's license. So then he stopped flying for a bit until the kids got a little bit older, me included. And
then it started.
And then it started. Then he started taking me up. He said, "You're coming with me. We're going flying." So this was we lived just outside of Washington, D.C. at the time. And so we flew out of an airport called Hyde Field. And it was just a little patch of an airport with probably maybe 15 airplanes or so. And so I think my very first flight with him was in a Tri-Pacer, a fabric airplane.
Wow.
So that's probably the only fabric airplane I've ever flown.
Yeah, I've never flown a fabric airplane.
Yeah.
That sounds so cool.
Very light and buoyant, and also very pretty bumpy. It really wasn't as solid as flying a metal airplane.
True.
But it was great, and it was my first experience. And he was like you, Mercedes. He liked to take some
fun.
Yeah, I mean, he would
Calculated risks.
Yes, definitely so. Yeah. And I say that as background, so you'll kind of know where my background came from with him. He grew up in Brooklyn, in kind of the poorer part of town, and ultimately, he was able to kind of stay safe enough that he could get into the military and do that when the time came. But he kind of worked himself up. He worked with his brother and his dad in a grocery store in Brooklyn, New York, and then they moved to D.C. All 3 of them moved to D.C. and they sold a grocery store. They bought a liquor store, and it became a little bit more lucrative. He could afford to now dust off his flying, and then he started taking me flying more.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, so he'd take me up, and he would do Shondel's Lazy 8 stuff that he learned how to do, and all that kind of stuff.
Did he get you to do it?
Well, I would be in the airplane when he did it.
Yeah.
And being a young stomach, I don't think I ever did the deed, but I felt it. I felt nauseous,
Oh, really?
at times.
You got plane sick?
At times.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but then I got used to it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it took that long to get used to it. It was really okay. And so then I just really started developing a passion for it. And he fueled it. he really wanted me to do it. He was very proud of the fact that I was doing it. I was not a great high school student.
No?
No, I was more average.
Okay.
I was playing music. I was
Yeah.
more of that
You were
of
more
that
into the
mind.
arts than to
Yeah.
the technical, but you still ended up going.
I did. I went on and got some advanced degrees and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. I said I did do that, and it was a good thing.
Yeah.
It helped give me the opportunities to live the good life that I've had. So yeah, so but see, he was quite proud. So every time we went out to a restaurant or anywhere, he said,
You'd-
"My son's a pilot."
Oh, that's so cool. You'll be like, yeah,
All
well, I
over.
learned it from him.
That's right. I would. I'd say he gets the credit.
Oh.
But he was, among my other family members. I mean, he was really a best friend to me too. I mean, we were really close. We'd usually go out to the airport every Sunday or Monday when he was off.
So you had a
And,
regular kind of
regular
flight
thing going.
schedule
Yeah.
together. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so fun and so special.
Oh yeah, he'd have me.
Yeah.
He'd bring home trader-planes. I don't know if you know the paper version of the trader-plane back
No,
then
I
was
don't.
like, just pages and pages
Okay.
of airplanes for sale and gear for sale and lessons to be given and everything. And I'd just look at every one of them. We'd be watching a baseball game, and I'd say, "How about this one? This one looks really good. Let's
yeah.
So yeah, that looks really good. He kind of
Banter back and
encouraged me to
forth,
look at
yeah.
it, and get to know, some of the features and the avionics and what
Yeah.
each airplane had and the reasonableness of the cost at the time and all that.
So did he only go as far as his private pilot, or
Yeah.
did he do any additional training on top of that?
He just did the private pilot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after I got my private, I took the written test.
Okay.
And I passed the written test, and but I just life kind of took over, and so I never completed that portion of it until much later, when I was in my 40s, my late 40s. Then I got my instrument rating, and my commercial around that time, like
So you
1990s.
kind of compounded it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got my IFR first. I got my instrument rating first, and then right after that, I said, "This is great. I'm going for another rating." And then and then after the commercial, I started my CFI training,
Yeah.
and got a little bit through it, and got maybe 20% through it, and then a job called me to Toronto.
Yeah,
You know,
which brought you to
Brought me
Canada.
here. Yeah, thank God.
Oh, well,
So-
I'm very, very thankful that you ended up coming
Thank
to
you for
Canada.
that.
But
Me
I'm
too.
also happy
Me
that
too.
you have all this experience in the States too.
Yeah,
Which is a really good combination.
yeah.
But I
yeah.
do hope you get your commercial pilot's license in Canada.
Well, I did get my commercial, but
Canada.
in Canada, different. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I mean, I
maybe
would,
someday.
like I told you before,
Yeah.
in my head, my heart, I
Maybe
want to do it.
It'll
you
be
know.
fun.
Yeah. And you might be the CFI to do it for me.
That could be fun.
Right.
Hey, new memories. All right. Well, how did you get, so you kind of covered how you got started with recreational flying
Yeah.
and who inspired you.
Yeah.
Besides your dad, did you have any other mentors and fellow enthusiasts that kind of encouraged you along the way as well?
Yeah. I can't really say that there's anyone particularly notable
Yeah.
along the way like my
Other
dad
than
was.
your dad. Yeah.
He was probably the most significant by far. But then, how the network of pilots that when you go to an airport, you just happen to start talking to people.
Yeah, you just start creating a community and
Yeah.
hanging out and discussing different weather situations or problems or just the joy of flying.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. And they're all inspirational. They all have different stories, and they're interested in your stories. And,
Yeah.
so there's so many, it would be hard to, really say, one in particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than your dad,
Other than my dad, for sure.
which is very, very special.
Good old dad, yeah.
Oh. Well, then the next one is, I understand you owned an airplane for a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that came about.
Yes, yes. Well, I used to rent all the time. And
Okay.
it would be, 150, 152s.
Did your dad own a plane at any point?
No, we were always member of a club.
Okay.
Yeah. And the club had 3 airplanes. It
Okay.
had a complex airplane, had a primary trainer, and kind of the in-between
Yeah.
kind of step up from the student pilot type thing. It's usually 150
Yeah.
or 152
Yeah.
when they came out, and then a Cherokee 180, a Piper 180.
Which is very nice.
Right? And
It's
then,
very nice.
yeah, it's very forgiving and very
Yeah.
reliable. It was a really good airplane that way. And then a retractable variable pitch prop. And that would have been like a 210 or a cardinal,
Yeah, those are very nice.
depending on, what year we're talking about.
Yeah.
So those were the three choices for the club
Okay.
when we were living in DC.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And then how did you get,
How
so
did I
that was
get
in
to-
DC, how
right.
did you get to owning a plane? And you kind of mentioned that you owned a plane with a couple other people. So
Right.
how did that come about?
that's right. Yeah.
What
So,
conversation started that?
right. That's it. Well, so I was getting my IFR training.
Yeah.
I was getting my instrument rating, and so the guy following my lesson usually was a guy named Gordon Gibby.
Okay.
And Gordon was a medical doctor. He was an anesthesiologist. And so after he would go and do his thing, and we would wind up chatting a little bit between us students,
Yeah.
while Brian was off filling out a log or figuring out what we were going to do next or
Yeah.
whatever. And so we got close, and it was really nice. He was a great guy. He was a wonderful partner. Ultimately, we decided we were going to buy, an airplane and establish like an S corporation, and make a club out of it. And we'd open it up to 3 more slots, so we'd have 5 total pilots. And it really helped a lot because it would help us with the fixed costs.
Yeah.
And then the
The
variable
maintenance
costs
and everything
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are hourly costs. We would pay for it just the same as if we were a club member, so that we would help build a reserve
Okay.
for the maintenance. So, being a financially guy, I was on the financial
so you
side.
figured out the business side of things.
Right.
And
he took care of the operational side of it.
okay.
And he was amazing at it. I mean, he couldn't fix things that he wasn't certified to fix, but he could identify the problem and tell the mechanic, that's what you want to look for. He was very good this way.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, so it was really
It
good.
was a very good mix then.
It was.
Yeah.
We were a really good partnership.
Yeah.
And so we decided to look for an airplane to buy, and we ultimately decided on an Archer,
Okay.
a 1980 Archer. And we lived in Gainesville, and we found one in St. Petersburg, Florida, which was, about an hour flight or
Yeah.
so down
Super
the road. Not by
Short
car.
flight, a little longer drive.
Right, yeah. But a beautiful area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we found this little jewel down there. It's a 1980 Archer, and it was a little outdated in terms of avionics. So GPS was just emerging at that time. So at that time, I think it was a Garmin 430 that we wound up putting in.
Okay.
And boy, did that make flying easier.
Oh, absolutely.
Cross country VFR
Rather
planning,
than having to have a map on you at all times
Yeah.
and trying to, as much as VFR training and flying is very good practice,
Yes, and necessary.
very
I think even
necessary.
still.
but it's very nice to have a GPS.
Yeah, it really was. It was a bit of a learning curve from a guy who,
Right.
for us, I mean, for us older guys, we were using, the circular slide rule, and then the
absolutely.
wind correction angles
Yep.
on the back, and
Yeah.
that's and I still I really enjoyed that part of flight planning. It was not drudgery for me. I
Yeah.
just liked doing it. Yeah.
You like
So the flight planning part of it,
Yeah.
so I continue to do it, even though
even though you
ultimately-
didn't have to the same extent,
Yeah.
because you always had to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you should.
Yes.
I mean, it's important, I think. And I
It's-
think landmarks along the way, you would want to find landmarks to make sure that you're properly positioned within the landmarks on both sides of the route and all that.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, there's that water tank that I just saw
Yeah.
that was on the map. It's just,
Well, it's always
really
nice.
fun.
I find it very rewarding to see a landmark and be like, I actually know where I am.
Yes.
Based on my surroundings, on
That's
the
right.
ground, not just. I really love GPS because it makes things easier.
Yes.
But it is much more rewarding to do it without.
Yeah.
So
Totally agree with it.
So then back to your aircraft. What was your wife's thoughts when you started talking about this? Was she for it?
Well,
Was she not so for it?
she supported me in so many things that I wanted to do in my interest that she really were like, no, I really don't support this, but she was always encouraging. She
Yeah.
never said, don't do it. Don't do anything. She never said no to something she knew I wanted to do.
Okay.
I mean, assuming it was good for me.
Right.
Right.
Assuming it was safe.
Yeah. She was the right
So-
partner for me because,
She
if I was going to
is.
fall over the cliff,
She
she
would
was going
yank you right back.
Yes,
Be like,
indeed. Yeah.
excuse me, sir.
That's right. And she was usually right.
Yeah.
So she was really supportive.
Okay.
I made the mistake of saying on the day that we bought the airplane that it was the happiest day of my life. This was not a good thing to say in front of you.
Wrong
I
thing to
know.
say.
No, this was not, and I've never lived that down, even
Well,
though
you're still here to tell the story at least.
that's right. That's right. Well, we're laughing about it now, so
Yeah.
that was good. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. What about her? What about my
Yeah.
son? What about my
family
daughter?
first, then the aircraft.
Yeah, that's gotta be. Gotta remember. But that's how happy I was when we
Yeah.
got that airplane. I was just celebrated that moment. And
Did your family enjoy going up for flights with you in that airplane?
they more from the standpoint of getting from point A to point B, not so
It
much
was-
from just getting up. Like if I said,
Yeah.
"Come on, we're gonna go. Let's go fly. We'll go.
You're like,
bore some
where,
holes in the sky."
where are we going? Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you'll stop and we'll get a hamburger someplace, I might consider it.
Oh,
Which we would
yeah.
do. The old story of the $100 hamburger. Which,
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say the very expensive hamburger.
yeah, probably 3 times this much now than
It's
it
a nicer
was.
it's a nicer flight than the drive, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
still expensive.
That's right. That's right. It was more functionality for
Yeah.
them, I think. Yeah. But it was good functionality because we could just go over and if we fly over to St. Augustine, it was,
Which
it
I
was
love St. Augustine.
right. And
Oh, so
nice little
beautiful.
airport. And you
Oh
come
my
in over the
goodness.
coast, the Atlantic coast. It was just gorgeous. Yeah. Or on the other side, did you ever fly into Cedar Key? Cedar Key is a small
I
airport there?
never flew into Cedar Key. I know it, but I've never flown into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's another really cool walkable from, you
Okay.
can walk to Cedar Key.
Because I definitely flew to St. Augustine and I definitely flew to St. Petersburg. And
Okay.
both of those I really love.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful.
That's the thing about Florida is different than, DC, flying there was interesting too.
I do want to fly into DC. It seems like a very complicated airspace.
It
though.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
Dulles, between Dulles, Reagan National now was
And the
Washington
TFRs
National
around
back
there.
then. Yes. Yeah, it was definitely tricky.
Yeah.
And I was a VFR pilot when I was flying up there. I didn't get my IFR till Florida. So it was interesting, yeah.
Would you say it's probably easier to fly there in IFR conditions than VFR?
Yes,
Now that you have
100%.
an instrument rating?
100%.
Yeah.
I kind of would say that just in general.
Yeah.
But especially in difficult areas to navigate because you're basically just following,
You just
tell me where you want me to go and how high you want me to be.
As long as you listen to the ATC, you're good.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. If you don't,
You know what happens after.
I know. I'm probably skipping through
No, it's
other
okay.
parts, but we'll come back.
Yeah.
But with the day after I got my instrument rating, I wanted to get up and file IFR right away.
Oh, yeah?
Right away.
You were that excited?
I was like super excited. I just wanted to do a solo flight and, have that experience.
Yeah.
So I got in the airplane and went down, and I used to fly into Ocala a lot from Gainesville.
okay.
It's just, it's like it's a half an hour flight down. So I get into Ocala, and I used to go there VFR, of course, and said.
But now you're doing it.
Now I'm going instrument, so I
fine.
filed instrument. Didn't need to. It was a nice day. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of so excited that this is going on. So I do all the proper reporting before taking off and get my clearance to leave Gainesville.
Yeah.
And, climb out, maintain 2,000 until we get back to and they got back to me and said, okay, turn 180 degrees, and head south. So I head south and go down there, and then I get, I'm just in my world just doing that, right? And I forget that I'm IFR.
Oh, no.
So I just go in there, I get downwind, and I think they told me to report when I'm downwind for, the northern, north-south runway. And so I forgot to do that, and I completely forgot anything by the time I got down. I got down without reporting at all. So
I hope did you turn off the radios before?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So you still had the radios on by the time
they
you
didn't know where I was because I hadn't reported, and I probably
Right.
should have reported at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got down on the ground in Ocala,
Yeah.
and I went into the office and everything. He said, "Well, you got a call from the tower up in Jackson from ATC. They want you to call. They want you to call the tower." I was like, "Oh, gee."
Oh my goodness.
Idiot, my first flight, you know?
Oh,
It's like,
well, I guess
oh,
you never forgot after
so,
that.
no, I never did. But I called the tower, it was very jittery.
Oh,
I told him, look, that was my very first IFR flight. I was so excited.
yeah.
And I'm so sorry, I won't do it again. You know?
Oh,
He was great. He said, don't worry about it. It's okay.
yeah.
No
Just want to
problem.
make sure
Yeah.
you're okay.
Yeah. So I went back to Gainesville and I told my flight instructor that I did that. And he said, you better document that conversation that you had with that tower official because they could come out and they could issue a formal
Right.
warning because you didn't do that. So I had to sort of put the scare on me. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
But so anyway, it was all well. Never heard back. It was okay, and I learned a great lesson, of course. You know,
Yeah,
but
no
always,
kidding.
Yeah, I
It was
mean,
a very good lesson.
yeah,
Well,
it was a cheap
as a-
lesson.
yeah.
But that's how weird that I'd be so excited that I'm using the rating and then I
Yeah.
totally fail.
I
Like I would have failed a
right.
check ride. If it,
Oh,
if it would
absolutely.
have been my flight test, it'd be like, okay, just.
Though I don't
land.
think you would forget on your check ride because you're so nervous about the check ride
Well,
itself.
that's true too. And
You have that
he's
person
right
constantly
there.
watching you.
Yeah, I was sold,
Yeah.
so that's a good point. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, I guess.
I appreciate that.
I know. I was always nervous for all of my check rides.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no reason to be. They were always. I never had.
Yeah.
never
I always had good check ride examiners. They were always great.
Nice, huh? That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
important.
It eases the nerves a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They would talk to you and make conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like you're getting in there and they're giving you the silent treatment and you're like, oh,
Yeah, you're like,
what's
am I
happening?
screwing up yet?
Yeah,
Or am I
yes.
good? And it's like, and you passed. Oh, thank
Right.
goodness.
Yeah. Although when I took my commercial check ride.
Did you do it in do you have your multi?
No, I don't have
Okay,
multi,
so-
but I did use complex. I
Okay.
flew a Centurion
Right.
for that. It was a retractable. The first actually it was two flights. It was one flying, I think it was a 172, and the second came back and they wanted to see that you could fly a retractable
Right.
variable pitch. And so when I got down, he said, I'll meet you up in the office.
Okay.
And so I said, oh, okay. You didn't say pass,
Yeah.
fail, anyway. Just it seemed a little weird.
Okay.
So I thought, oh God, I guess,
What-
I don't know. I was a little sketchy on whether or not I
Yeah.
passed or not. I didn't think I had any reason not to be, but maybe
Yeah.
they're holding back something that I should have done that
Yeah.
I didn't. And so he said, tie the airplane up and, I'll meet you up there. So I went up there and when I got in there, he was sitting with my flight instructor. My flight instructor was the chief flight instructor for the airport. He was
Okay.
a great instructor.
Aw.
Yeah, Brian Jensen. He was just amazing. He was really
That's
good.
amazing.
He's my IFR flight and,
Yeah.
and commercial. And they're looking their long faces, really. I'm like, oh man, this is not looking good.
Yeah.
And they're quiet and they're watching me come in. And it happened to be April Fool's Day.
Dang it! Oh my goodness!
It was April 1. So I'm like,
Oh, they planned that
they
well.
did. I'm looking at them like, and they held out for I don't know, a couple of minutes,
Oh my
just like
goodness.
didn't really say too much, and they're just kind of talking amongst themselves like they were trying to avoid the conversation a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, they really played that
And
well.
then they both, it was like on three, April Fool's Day out. It's like,
Congratulations,
you
you
guys.
got
Yeah. But then I'm so joyful that
Yeah.
it was
a
fun.
nice camaraderie moment.
Yeah, it could have been.
Jokes on you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's easy for me to laugh at myself, so it's
And
I could take it in good
nice
stead.
to laugh at old stories.
Yeah,
True.
yeah,
But nerve-wracking in the moment when you're like, okay, do I have to do this again?
yes, very much so.
Oh my goodness.
That's right.
Oh, but that's special. That's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, it's another good
Yeah.
memory.
So back to you running your
Airplane.
airplane.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you remember? Like, what was the process for maintaining and storing your airplane?
Yeah. Well, it's Florida, so I didn't need to be hangared indoors.
Yeah, you didn't
Right,
have to
we-
worry about ice as much.
No,
There's
not
still a
as
little bit depending on
Yeah.
where you are in Florida. But
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so we had it under a T hanger. So,
Okay.
you had neighbors that are, no separation or anything like that. The only issue that I can really think of that had significant threat and risk was the possibility, during the hurricane season, you know,
Yeah, so what would you do with that?
that could always be a little bit dicey.
Would you fly the
So,
airplane out to another state or something like
exactly,
that
yeah,
out of the
yeah.
path?
Or out of the path, like up to Tallahassee, maybe if it was on the Gulf, if the hurricane was coming in the Gulf side, then we maybe take it up closer to on the East Coast
Yeah.
if Jacksonville was off the path of the
Yeah.
forecast, or maybe down south to Fort Lauderdale or Miami.
Yeah.
Do that, or maybe Tallahassee if it was coming in from the Atlantic and it was kind of heading up. Often, the fronts would be so that like Hurricane Floyd, it was incredibly large. It was bigger than the entire state of Florida.
So was that your most notable hurricane then, as far as an
Up to
aircraft
that
owner?
point, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, and because you had to fly it out of Florida completely. You had to, because it just overlapped the margins on both sides of the coast.
Yeah, so where'd you
and
take it?
south too.
Texas or?
No, it went up to Georgia.
Okay.
Went up to
So
Georgia.
it was safe in Georgia then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and my partner had his parent. I think maybe it's just his mom, but she lived up there.
Okay.
So he would go there frequently. So it wasn't a big deal for him to take the airplane up there and do that.
Okay.
And so, well, we had several times like that. We never actually got hit by a hurricane. I mean, in Gainesville, it's north central Florida.
Yeah.
So fortunately, during the 24 years we lived there, we never actually got hit by, sort of the center of
Yeah.
the center of the hurricane.
Yep.
It was usually the outlying and,
Yep.
the aftermath.
Right.
And you'd have high winds, so trees would get knocked down, power lines, things like that. But we were lucky.
Okay.
Basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We got pretty lucky, except for the times where it looked like we're definitely in trouble. So let's get the airplane out of there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would do the same thing. You'd see the airport would be pretty bare bones,
Yeah.
except for a few
The flight
brave
school
souls.
that I went to, there was 2 instances with hurricanes that they took all the airplanes to either Texas or somewhere else that would be free from the hurricane.
Yeah, well, Texas is that's a ways to go.
It is a ways to go.
But if you got to do what you got to do,
I think they had some kind of agreement over there or something like that with another flight
could
school
do it.
that would take them for the duration of the
Okay.
hurricane. Yeah.
And was that a frequent occurrence there? Where you
It
were?
was twice that I can remember. It was literally right after orientation we got hit with a hurricane. I can't remember which one it was. It was in 2017. And then, was it 2017? Yeah, it was 2017. And then I think there was another one in 2019. So, yeah.
Wow. When did you start there?
I started 2017 in September, I think. So I was 17 years old
Oh,
and
my
I
goodness.
turned 18 in October there.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Similar in this way.
Yeah,
and plus or
exactly.
minus a couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's
So then I
awesome.
was there for 2 years.
I was so thrilled when I heard you were taking flying lessons. When Tora told me that, I was like, wow, really? That's fantastic. It's so young.
Yeah. And
You know?
you said you started at around 15 years old
Yeah.
too, which is the same
Yeah.
age as I
Yeah,
was.
that's right. You
Yeah.
could get your student pilot's license at 15.
I couldn't get mine.
You couldn't do it at that time?
I could finish all of the training and even the test,
But you
but I
couldn't.
couldn't physically have the document in my hand until I turned 16.
You're private. You're
Yeah.
saying you're private? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying get issued a student. So you had a student.
true.
We had paper of
Yeah.
license that said I was a student, and you couldn't apply until you were 15.
Okay,
But
and
you
that
could
was
do
in
it
the
at 15.
States.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, yeah, you had to wait, I think, it was 16, I guess, until you could actually, take your actual flight test.
Whereas
And
you
the
have,
written too. Just
where
like
you have
just
Canada, which I don't know if it still is, but at least when I started my training, it was the lowest age that you could start soloing at 14.
at 14.
At 14.
Really?
So you still couldn't get your private pilot license.
But you could
But you
solo?
could solo at 14 years old.
Okay. In the States, it was 15. You could
Yeah.
solo. And you could get a glider rating at 14. I don't know if that's still the case,
I think
but
that's
a glider
probably
rating,
still the case. That sounds
it?
about right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also here.
which is weird to me.
But I have to double
It
check
just
that,
seems
yeah.
to me, it's like,
You're so young.
really, 14?
But
You're going to let
I'll
me get up in an airplane? And
Learn to fly before you can drive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So learning the whole pedals of driving, I was like, well,
Nothing
this
to
is
it.
different. I'm not controlling a rudder.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. It's a whole different experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I probably prefer that. It was nice to not have to unlearn something from driving
Well,
to
that's
start
true
flying.
too. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really incredible. I
No,
love
that's
that.
fun. All right. Well, we've talked about owning an aircraft, and you kind of touched on what instruments you use. So you had analog instruments, I'm guessing,
We
and
did. Yeah,
then
we had
a GPS,
yeah.
a Garmin.
Yeah, we had 2 VORs.
Yeah, two
Yeah, and
VORs.
because it came with that. So
Okay.
so we stuck a G the 430 in there. It's in the panel
Nice.
too.
Yeah.
And we did a few other things. I think I can't remember. I think there was a mixture control thing that we put in there, and Gordon put in. I don't think he put it in, but it was his idea.
You got it put in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't do that much in terms of significant change to the airplane itself.
Other than you mentioned a little bit earlier that you painted the whole aircraft
We
as
did
soon as
that.
you got it,
Pretty much. Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
big job,
That was a big job.
but
Yeah.
a very fun experience. We had a couple
Yeah.
pictures.
Oh,
from
we had a
that.
great time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I showed you some pictures. We're in these, toxic level 5 things. So our faces, you're looking
Yeah.
through plastic sheets and everything.
And completely outside.
And outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You're-
dust particles and
I
dirt
mean,
and
you're
everything.
very, very fortunate you didn't get like a leaf blown onto the wet
Oh,
paint or
yeah.
anything like that, or did you?
No, we were really lucky. It
Okay.
was really really pretty good. It was outdoors, but it was in kind of like the equivalent of a T hangar.
Yeah.
So there was some blockage, and we tried to situate our cars and other barriers to keep it to a minimum. when
Like
we could.
pseudo walls.
Yeah, we were too cheap to pay for a professional job, I guess.
Well, it looked wonderful.
Right,
You did a very good job.
I thought so. And it was like you say, it was a really great learning
Yeah.
experience for how to do
And
it.
it was a passion project.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
it
put
was
your
great.
whole heart into it.
Yeah. So we leave the airplane there. It took us about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so, like, during
you
the work
did it
week.
in like in sections or something like that?
Yeah. We kind of blocked off different sections of it, exactly. And it was at a different airport that was soft field. It was grass field, which was really fun because we'd try to get in there, flying in there every other day or so just to get in, let the paint dry, and then kind of get going again. And so we got some good soft field landing and takeoff experience doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Nothing, don't have to simulate that at all.
Yeah.
Just real world.
Yeah. And speaking of soft field, I'll just toss this little gem in there for anybody who's listening that's thinking about soft field takeoffs and landings.
You got a good
This
story
is not
for
me.
this?
Yeah, I got a good story. I wasn't with my dad and mom when this happened, so I shouldn't be doing that in the microphone. So this was up in Maryland. There's a little airport called Kent Island.
Okay.
And it's right kind of on the Chesapeake Bay. It's to the east of Washington, D.C. And it's before you actually get to the Atlantic Ocean. So it's on the way to the beach. But there was this cool little soft field, grass field, that was there called Kent Island Airport. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's still there. It was used a lot because you just got out and you could really look around, and it was very pristine. It was almost like being out in the middle of nowhere, but really everything is around you, but you can't see it.
Okay.
Yeah. So so my mom and dad went. My dad kind of liked the idea of going into, a grass field.
Yeah.
So he gets
So was
down
this
there.
his first time
First time?
in the grass field?
I doubt it. I think he had flown there before, but I'm not 100% sure. I think he'd been there, so he felt like, okay, I got this. I've done this before.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. I'd never been with him when he did it. But he goes in with my mom. My mom was a little bit of a nervous Nelly.
Oh, yeah?
But she was a little bit like Diana in the sense that, all right, God, please take care of me. Make sure I'm landing. I get down on the ground. Okay.
What goes up must come down safely, please.
Right, exactly. You're right. So, so my dad came in, he did his downwind, did the base leg, comes in on his final approach. And, he's just doing his flare and the wheels catch and, just.
Oh, no.
And then he's in the mud, sunk in the mud. And, usually in a soft field, you want to do a flyover at low altitude so you can see, what's going on down there. If it
So
looks
must have
like
had
there's
some rain the day before or rain the morning.
The day he flew, it was a beautiful day. So he was thinking it must be okay.
Yeah.
And he thought, I guess the airport looks like it did when last time I was
no.
here, so I guess it's okay. But yeah, that was kind of a little lesson, At least
Yeah.
maybe make some inquiries
Yeah.
on the
Well, I
radio.
was
Say,
gonna.
is it okay to be
Yeah, I was
flying
gonna
in
ask
a?
if there was any way for him to ask about that.
The Unicom would have,
Okay.
if there were
If there was.
pilots in the area,
Yeah.
Unicom would have, maybe somebody said,
Like,
you might want to
hey,
think twice about that
there
one.
was some rain yesterday. Oh
So he was
man.
so embarrassed because he was a really good pilot. And
Yeah.
he was, usually he was, pretty
Yeah.
fastidious in some ways. He was
Did your mom end up going up with him again?
yeah.
Yeah. She forgave him.
I don't know about the forgiveness
Oh,
part,
okay.
but she did go. Yeah. Shortly after that, we took a flight up to, she wanted to go visit her sister who lived in Teterboro, outside of Teterboro, New Jersey, which you're going
Okay.
through the New York airspace.
Yeah.
So my dad and I flew her up there, and I think, she was her typical nervous Nelly, but
Yeah.
she knew we were landing on a hard surface runway, so
So
it's going to be okay.
hard surfaces were okay from then on.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be okay. She still wanted to get from point A to point. There was a goal here, and that it
Okay.
wasn't like she wanted to go up and
Yeah,
shoot holes in
sightsee
the
or
sky.
anything in sky. No. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, at least you went up again.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I know she was always scared every time I went when I was a teenager living
yeah?
at home. She was, yeah.
How is she with you starting your flight training and stuff like that?
She was okay.
She was okay with it?
Yeah, she was. I mean, I wouldn't say she was okay with it, but
Okay.
at that point, my dad was like, she could see what pleasure it was giving him.
Yeah.
That she was like, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
She's like, well, have fun.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Yeah.
Did she ever go up with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did. She went up. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Diana's mom did.
Yeah.
And yeah. You know what amazed me so much? Not then. I just took it totally for granted. But looking back now as a father and a grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot of my friends up. And I had some friends, like when I was in university,
Yeah.
we wanted to do like a photography business, aerial photography business, and I was
Oh,
going to
yeah.
fly. And
Absolutely.
two of them were photographers.
Ooh.
And so we started, I was still in Maryland at the time,
Okay.
and we started a little business, aerial photography business, and we just found areas that were under construction.
And you took.
Yeah, like hospitals,
Okay.
government buildings, bigger buildings and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And, even some homes that we thought might be kind of just a beautiful home. This guy might want some pictures of stages from the air. No drones back then.
Right.
So we were
totally different.
We were the drones,
Yeah.
right? We thought, oh yeah, we're going to make $1 million doing this,
Did you?
Well, the only way to make $1 million in aviation,
Yeah.
start with 2.
Yep.
Start with 2 million, and
Yep.
so we didn't make any money. I mean, none to speak of.
No, not.
No.
Did you end up selling any photography to
Yeah.
anybody? Yeah.
Yeah. We had a couple. I mean, it didn't last that long because we were so busy with school.
True.
We
So
were
how
all in
old
the
were you
engineering
guys when
program.
you were kind of pitching this idea then?
Let's see. I was at the University of Maryland at the time, so I was probably 19, 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so were your friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we were all in the engineering program there.
Oh, fun.
So, yeah. So, kind of ambitious and
Yeah.
thought we could do anything kind of thing.
So diverting a little bit, since you didn't go the path of aviation, but you always kept it kind of in your life, what degree did you end up getting? You said something about engineering.
Yeah, I didn't get an engineering degree.
No?
No, I didn't.
So what did you get?
No, I wound up going to St. Louis University,
Okay.
and I got a degree in transportation administration.
Wow.
Because you got to keep in mind the Vietnam War was coming on in 1968 when my desire to become a military pilot.
Right.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah. Kind of in the blood a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose, But 68, that, a lot of military pilots were flying. And then shortly after that, the war ended. So all the military pilots were taking the jobs as civilian pilots, airline pilots.
Right.
And so it looked like the
Flooded
prospects
the
for somebody who
market
like
a bit.
me,
Yeah.
somebody like me who is, just, a budding private pilot,
Yeah.
just coming out, the chances of me actually having a successful career
Well,
competing against guys that
yeah.
were flying F-4s in Vietnam,
Yeah.
pretty slim. So I still wanted to stay in aviation.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a degree in transportation administration, which would be this would be how to run an airport, managing
Right.
an airport,
Yeah.
and other types of transportation as well,
Which
because
kind
it's
of
very
connects
intermodal,
the business side of things.
Yeah, it
And
was the business side of
yeah,
aviation.
got
So
it.
I got a degree in that from St. Louis University, and then kind of went off and I became a systems analyst, computer systems analyst for I worked with the Computer Sciences Corporation as a consultant for Department of
Okay.
Energy,
Oh my
not
goodness.
aviation related.
No,
Then
but
Department
nothing
of
to
Justice.
laugh at either.
No, it was actually very good. I mean, it was good for me in a sense. It kind of, it wasn't aviation, so that was a little disappointing,
Mhm.
but it was good. It was great. I was young, at that time. If you got a college degree, you pretty much knew you were going to get a job.
Yeah.
You could find a job. I mean, you have to take some initiative and do it, but you would. So after that, I went to work for another consulting firm called Aspen Systems Corporation, and we had a contract with the Department of Justice.
Okay.
So we kind of developed the very first criminal justice system where you could enter keywords. This because I had a programming background. Like
Right.
in high school, I actually I had a part-time job working as a computer programmer while I was going to high
Okay.
school. I was a busy guy.
Yeah, nothing to laugh at all.
Little of that ADD,
Overachiever.
Well, I mean, I just like to
Everything.
stay busy, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I'm constantly, somebody says, "Oh, you want to try that?" It's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll try it." I just want
I
to
can relate to that.
go that way.
Well, that's not,
know.
that's wonderful.
Well, yeah, it's life, right? You got
Yeah.
to take advantage of, pretty much every moment because
Absolutely.
especially, as you get older, you start to realize that the window's closing, it's,
Well,
and you just don't know. So you
yeah.
just take your chance and just hope that
Hopefully
it
not for
goes
a
for a
while,
long time.
though. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Different
still feel like I'm 20, so thank God for that.
Well, I'd have to agree.
Thank you. Very kind of you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yes, I'll take it.
So, following up, what was your favorite destination to fly to, and why was it special?
Wow, that's really hard.
Are you able to choose one? I guess is a better question.
There are so many. I mean, I really enjoyed every flight. When I, go back and look at my logbook and where I went, who I was with, it's such a great trip down memory lane because it just opens up a window to that whole day. You just remember so much about each and every one of them. They're all special. So I kind of thought about this in terms of what we were doing today.
Yeah.
So I kind of narrowed it down to, we used to fly to Frederick, Maryland from Gaithersburg, which was like a half an hour flight. It was very short, and they had an annual air show there. It's actually where AOPA is headquartered.
Okay, I didn't know
where
that.
it wasn't headquartered there at the time.
Okay.
It was headquartered in Bethesda, Maryland, which was really close. In fact, my mom worked for
Oh,
AOPA.
no. Oh, wow. So that was still kind of like aviation
Still somehow,
connected.
but
Oh,
it
my
was totally
goodness.
serendipitous. It wasn't
Yeah.
because my dad was
Yeah.
she saw an opportunity to
Oh
go
my
and she went
goodness,
to
that
work
is
for
so
them.
cool.
And she was like a course development person,
Yeah.
around the country. They would give courses
Okay.
for whatever,
Yeah, for
aviation
like
related courses.
safety or
Yeah.
different things
Yeah,
like that.
there's Aircraft Safety Foundation,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so she was an event planner
Okay.
and would handle that. In fact, she kind of waited to give me my AOPA membership number until it was a special number. Wasn't like,
Oh, really?
87422,
Do
whatever.
you still have it?
I do. I
Oh
still
my
have it. And
goodness.
it's 333777.
Oh, that's so fun.
Because she did that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have that to my grave. I'm never going to give up
Yeah.
my membership because,
Hey, your mom chose it for you.
that's right. And, look now at AOPA membership. It's like the numbers must be,
Oh, yeah. I can't even remember what mine is. The number's up there.
There's
The
quite a few
number is up
digits,
there.
right?
Yeah, there's a lot of digits.
Yeah, this is 6, so it's,
Yeah.
it's like a
Oh,
legacy
but that's
piece.
so cool.
Yeah, so she used to do the work there.
Yeah.
And so, we flew to Frederick for the air show. So it's kind of cool to mingle in with the, like fly up there and then
Yeah.
get put into that air traffic pattern for airports
Yeah.
where, they're coming in a lot and, the controllers
Absolutely.
are really,
So you came in before the air
on
show
the job.
started or
Yeah.
anything like that? Oh,
Park your airplane, then walk it to the show. So we would do that.
oh,
There was
that's
another show at the Patuxent Naval Air Station, that airport, and Blue Angels, would
oh
come out. And
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
a
Okay.
massive one. It was done at the naval station, so that's a Navy outfit, the
Yeah.
Blue Angels. So they and so everybody, they'd have guys flying, stunt flyers flying,
Oh my
the
goodness.
mad professor who would to go up in a J3 Cub, and he was
Mad
going to,
Professor.
yeah, just
Okay.
he would be a guy that at every air show he would appear, and he'd come in and he was going to give somebody else a lesson, and
Okay.
so they had a tandem J3 Cub
Oh, that's
that
so
they would
cool.
go, and it looked like a raggedy old airplane.
Yeah.
And he'd get up there and he'd be taxiing like, really erratically. And everybody's like, this guy's going to take off in the airplane, go like that, And
So he knew what he was
he
doing,
was a great
but
pilot.
he
He was a
was
great
just having
pilot,
a lot
but
of fun.
he was like a clown
Oh my goodness.
at,
The
at a
clown of the
circus.
skies.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
It was so fun to watch.
Oh.
It was great. And then they'd have kind of racing around the sky, just in
Air-
lanes, they were,
yeah.
some of them were competition. And
So you got to see some air races then.
yeah, air
Some
races.
smaller ones though.
Yeah. We
That's
saw
so
one
cool.
where a plane went down.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're in the bleachers and everything, and we're looking straight ahead. At some point, we see the airplane start to come down, and boom, just see this
Yeah.
plume of smoke coming out.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, he made it out.
He did?
He made it out.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
well, that's good to
It's
hear because
pretty amazing.
there's many of those stories that are
Very-
not so
good.
Yeah.
Somehow, because they weren't, when you fly at those air shows, they have some limits to how low they can get
Right.
for the protection of
Yeah, of course.
the crowd. And so he must have been at the right limit to be able to get out
Okay.
and parachute down.
Oh my goodness.
So it was quite a
But-
story, but it was
Yeah,
terrifying to
but
watch.
well, yeah, terrifying to watch, but at least he has a story that he can tell.
Yes.
It's not
That's
someone
right.
else telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those were two special places to fly.
Yeah.
But then St. Augustine, like you mentioned
Yeah.
before, Cedar Key was great to go because they had great seafood there. You can just go
Yeah.
over there.
They
and-
have so much good food
yeah.
there. It's so
It
yummy.
was fantastic. Yeah.
Did your family have any specific places that they like to fly to? In the smaller aircraft, obviously, there's different destinations with
Yeah.
big commercial flights, but any smaller destinations that they have
Yeah,
favorites?
yeah. Actually, my son and I, just before we went off to medical school, we wanted to do something special. He and I just did, just
Yeah.
the boys, basically. We were going to do something special.
Yeah.
So we took a trip out of Gainesville, and we went up through Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. We flew up to
Wow.
Lexington, Kentucky, and each way along the way, we're both playing golf. So we
Oh,
bought
yeah?
clubs, and we found a good golf club at each stop. So close enough to the airport
Well,
that
that's
we stay
fun.
overnight. Get up and play golf next morning,
Yeah.
and then take the next leg up to the next airport,
Oh my
and then fly
goodness.
back from Lexington.
That's
And
so fun.
it's such a great flight because
Yeah.
you're over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it's
Which is stunning.
absolutely gorgeous. It's like 550
And when did you do
miles.
that? Did you do that during the summer or?
Yeah, probably that was probably more of a summer
Yeah.
flight because he was getting ready to start school in
Okay.
September.
Oh,
So, yeah.
that's a
So
special.
that was-
yeah, that's
it
a
really
very
was.
special
Yeah,
flight.
yeah. There's a little bit of a story there that happened coming through Atlanta
Oh, yeah?
airspace.
Okay, what's
Yeah.
that?
Atlanta, is now the busiest airport in the world.
Yes.
And I think it still is. I think it
Oh.
still was very busy. Like the-
Regardless if it's the most busy in the world, it's still very busy airport.
Yeah.
Period.
yeah, it may not be the most, it's busiest I know in
The
the
U.S.
U.S.
airspace, yeah.
I'm not sure. I know it's way up there
Yeah.
in terms of busy, but not to, I don't want to speak too hyperbolically, but for me to go through that airspace, it was kind of intimidating. I was,
Of course.
yeah, I was still
Were
kind
you
of a newly minted.
you were instrument rated at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Before instruments, I would have used flight following for flights like
Yeah.
that. But after that, I was like always instrument. It was like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
So it was a hot day. So yes, it must have been summer.
Okay.
I think the answer to that question, I'm pretty sure it was because it's a hot day. And we were loaded with golf clubs and our luggage and, us. And so I'm going through, so I announced my intentions to Atlanta when they give me the handoff to Atlanta, we were, the guy told me to report in when I hit 6,500,
Yeah.
I can stay on course, but, report in when when you hit 6,500. I just laugh every time you tell this story. This story just,
Okay.
this is another laugh at Al story.
Okay.
But it's so funny, and it's just I just remember it so vividly. Where it was a hot day, so what happens to airplanes when you point the nose up
Oh,
and
I
you're told
do.
to climb up.
Yeah.
And 6,500 is not that much, right? I mean, it's not like I'm
No.
flying up to 10,000
But
feet
you
or
have some
something like
hot
that.
air
Hot air
and
and loaded, right?
yeah.
So the airplane's like, it's like inching up, and it seems like it's taken an
Foot by
hour to get
foot.
up there. It feels like that. You're crawling, and I'm like, I got to report at 6,500. This guy's gonna think, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So I finally get up to 6,500, and I write say November 81586,
Yeah.
reporting it at 6,500, and the tower guy or the controller at that center, he says, "Everybody hear that?" It's totally, I can't even tell you the reaction. He was just like, 81586 made it up to 6,500 finally. Just announce it to everybody in that
Did the whole
airspace.
airspace start laughing?
Yeah, that was right. I'd start getting congratulations from these big heavies that are flying.
Oh,
Oh, it's just such a great story. I mean,
yeah. Oh my
but
goodness, that's amazing.
but my son, he's like, is that bad, Dad? I'm just laughing, and
Yeah.
so he knows it's not bad, but he was kind of embarrassed for
Oh,
me. It was almost like,
it's like, well, you can't do anything about the aircraft.
that's right. What are you going to do? The weather conditions, I did
Yeah.
the best I could. I was probably climbing maybe 200 feet a minute or something, It
Oh,
was
that's
like,
still not
I should be at
bad.
500,
Yeah, I think my worst was 100 feet per minute because we were climbing in just a Piper to 8,500. So it was a very
It took you a
slow.
while.
Yeah, and
It
that was
took you a
also
while.
the summer.
Oh, so yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking 100, huh? You're talking
Yeah.
100 feet per
Yeah,
minute.
you're
Boy, that's a slog.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It felt like forever. You're just looking at it like go foot by foot. You're like, are we actually gonna get there? I don't know.
Did you get a controller on saying, she's
No,
finally there?
no,
Are you
thankfully we
there
were
yet?
still in the Buffalo area when we did
Okay.
that. We were heading down to Florida.
Oh,
So
okay. I
yeah,
gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But
So that was kind of
same thing.
another
Oh
moment to remember.
man.
That's what I mean. Every time you
Yeah.
go up, you just kind of, you sort of, if you go in sort of flexible and, you kind of
Ready for anything
expect anything.
or expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
Well said.
it keeps it more entertaining
Yeah.
as well as fun.
It does.
Yeah.
And, if you're too, I've been up with pilots that are very it's like having a golfer who makes a bad shot and they throw their club into
Yeah.
it's no fun. And it takes away the joy from everybody else who has to be around that negative energy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like going through life, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
a life lesson to just be flexible, open-minded, and what did you say? Expect the unexpected.
Expect the unexpected. It's as a type A personality, it sucks in a lot of ways, but I am more accepting of that
Right.
rule of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it makes it easier to
It
go through
does.
life.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good.
Well, you've mentioned a couple stories, but do you have another memorable or exciting experience that you had while flying? Because I'm sure you've been flying for many years. I'm sure you have quite a few,
Yeah, I
which
got a
you've
couple.
already mentioned a couple.
I mean, I lived through them.
Yeah,
So apparently,
exactly.
they were exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a student pilot and I'd soloed.
Okay, yeah.
My earliest lessons were from Manassas, Virginia, which is
Okay.
a little town
Yeah.
outside of DC.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty close to that airspace.
Okay.
So Dulles was kind of the closest big airport.
And that's a big airport. That's a
Yeah.
very big airport.
Yeah, so I was taking off from this little airport from Manassas. Colgan Airways was the FBO. And I just started, I went over to the practice space and I was practicing steep turns.
Okay.
And you know, kind of going through my, slow flight, steep
Going through
turns,
your
flaps
maneuvers
and
and
everything
stuff,
else,
yeah.
going through different things. And I must have floated into Dulles Aerospace a little bit. And so
You got a call?
I didn't get a call.
Okay.
Thank God I didn't get a call. But so I'm flying along, and I'm in a steep turn, and I come around, and steep turn, your head's still on a swivel, right? You still should be looking.
Yep.
And so I look over to my left, and there's a Pan Am Boeing 707,
Oh my gosh.
and I got so close to it. I mean, he probably saw me, and
Yeah.
he's probably here, and I was probably like this.
Oh my gosh.
He probably saw me on his radar.
Yeah.
I didn't have radar back then. That was,
Right.
1967, right? So,
Yep.
so, so, so I got close enough. I mean, when I leveled out to kind of make an evasive maneuver, I kind of leveled and then I kind of went down.
Yeah.
It was just instinctive, it was just, but I got so close that I could actually see the pilot's face, you know,
Oh my
right
goodness.
in the window, the co-pilot. It would have
Yeah.
been the co-pilot side, the right side.
Yeah.
So, and he just kind of gave me a stink eye look, but that was it basically.
Yeah.
And we both kind of went our separate ways and everything.
Oh my
But
goodness.
man, that just scared the bejesus out
Oh,
of me. I
yeah,
was like,
absolutely.
It was so close that you could see
You could see
his
their
face.
reactions.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think he must have seen me, and that's why he wasn't startled. He was, kind of like,
Yeah, I'm guessing you had a transponder in your aircraft
I
at
did.
least.
Yeah.
So
I did.
air traffic control was
They
probably
knew.
like, hey, by the way.
You're right. Yeah. But I didn't get aircraft, they didn't try
Yeah,
to call me out.
that seems kind of weird though.
Yeah, they didn't
They
try to
didn't-
call me up. That was
yeah.
kind of, I was relieved. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
thank God. And thank
I
God.
guess they put all the onus on them. Be
Yeah.
like, avoid this.
That's right. And they probably knew. They were probably in touch with the guy. The
Yeah.
guy said, well, I'll take evasive action right
Yeah.
now.
Well, that's a very memorable moment for sure.
Yeah, there's another minor moment that pops into my head, just not as nearly as significant as that. But I was coming into Downwood down in Ocala, just on a normal practice flight, and
Yeah.
stuff. And instead of pulling carburetor heat, when RPM's down to 1700,
Yeah.
I'm on downwind now, and instead of carburetor heat, I pull the mixture out. So, which is not terrible because
Oh, yeah.
enough so and I didn't realize it until a little bit late because the engine feathered, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? Am I out of gas? I'm looking for things, and I'm not thinking.
And this was on approach?
This was no. I'm turning on base at this
Okay.
point. I'm turning on base.
Okay.
So-
at least you're within distance of the airport to make a safe landing.
And so often they would pull the mixture and say, okay, what are you going to, kind of
Yeah.
practice that kind of thing, or not the mixture, but they pull the throttle back,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so
I'd be surprised if they pulled the mixture.
yeah,
honestly.
that wouldn't be good.
No.
Yeah, but the effect is the same, right? They give
It's
you
true.
throttle; it's pretty much the same kind of thing. But it took me because I was sure that I pulled carb
So were
heat
you
out.
alone?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I was
you're
alone.
going through all these steps
Yeah,
on
I'm
your
trying
own
to figure out what everything's. And then I look at the mixture and so, jeez, put it in, restart, and off I got. Just kind of still made the landing okay. But that was startling too.
Yeah.
Just because you think you did something right, and so you don't think to recheck it. You're checking everything else. Like
Yeah.
I'm checking for my gas.
Yeah.
What could it be? What's and instant reaction kind of thing.
So I'm guessing you never did that again.
No, I never did that.
It was another
Don't pull
permanent
the
one.
red knob.
No. Don't hit the red button.
That's right. And on the Archer, it was a better situation because it was a quadrant.
Okay.
It wasn't pulling the knob that's kind of close
Yeah.
to the carb heat, and do that.
Okay.
Those cheap lessons.
Cheap lessons.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's one way to put it.
I know. Well, that's the thing. Aviation, is not known for being a forgiving hobby. If you're a hobbyist.
No, what goes up must come down.
That's right.
It's not. It's just a question of how you want to come down,
That's right.
and ideally safely.
Yeah, one way or another. Yeah, I mean, you're trained for that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
if the mix, if
If you remember your training properly,
yeah. It wouldn't have in the first place, but
it's
But
true.
it happened.
Or if you had a good teacher as well,
yeah.
that also
It makes
helps a
all the
lot.
difference. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
does. Yeah, I think every step of the way, I think I really had some good teachers.
Let's see. What tips would you share with someone just starting to explore aviation or aerospace as a hobby, not as a career?
Yeah.
Do you have any
Yeah, I
that come
think,
to mind?
frequency and recency. Keep flying as much
Yeah.
as possible and make it, don't let long periods of go, especially in your training. If you go in
Yeah.
your training, you take a lesson and then you go 6 weeks later, you're going to wind up taking the same lesson you just took 6 weeks
Right.
ago. You're going to crawl
You're not going to
forward.
advance very fast.
Yeah, I mean, as
Yeah.
an early pilot, I think that was a good lesson to learn because I was highly
Staggered.
motivated.
Yeah.
So one thing, and secondly, it's just I knew that good progress can be made
Yeah.
with a lot of practice, and just keep it recent so
Mm-hmm.
that you're learning something significant, new every time, and not going back and kind of have to relearn what you maybe learned a while back. Sometimes that's difficult. That's an easy
Mm-hmm.
thing to say and think, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. But then there's money. It costs a lot of money to
Oh,
train.
yeah. Yeah.
So that can be a factor.
Sometimes you have to get loans or a student line of credit or different things like that just to get through training.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in the early years with student pilot and pilot, you've got private pilots, you have weather factors. So if the
Yeah.
weather's bad, then that can hold you back. So if you have an opportunity, take it.
Yeah.
Take it. If you really want to move and
Yeah.
get your license relatively quickly.
Okay.
Other than that, I would say the second little tip would be to take Mercedes' advice. Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Be open-minded and be flexible, because stuff's going to happen along
Yeah.
the way, and you got to be ready. And don't freak out. Just
Absolutely.
listen to your training.
Yeah.
Let that training instinct take over.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on now.
So fun. My pleasure.
So wonderful.
That's great. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did, and I really hope you learned something new. A big thank you to Alan Ash for taking us along his incredible journey, from flying with his dad as a kid to soaring through the skies as a general aviation pilot. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore aviation and aerospace stories. Until then, I wish you sound skies and smooth landings. See you on the next episode of Skyward. Thanks for listening! If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. To those listening on Apple and Spotify, remember to follow and hit the notification button so you'll never miss an episode. Check out the Skyward YouTube channel to watch the video recording of each episode. Lastly, don't forget to follow on all social media platforms to stay up to date. Your support means the world. Thanks for tuning in.